stupid piece of shit. But I know I'm a piece of shit. That at least makes me better than all the pieces of shit who don't know they're pieces of shit. Or is it worse? Breakfast. Oh, I don't deserve breakfast. Shut up. Don't feel sorry for yourself. What does that do? Get breakfast, you stupid. These are cookies. This is not breakfast. You are eating cookies. Stop it. Stop eating cookies and go make yourself breakfast. Stop it. Don't eat one more cookie. Put that cookie.
What's up, everybody? So this video is also coming as a request. Like I always say, if you have a question that you may need answered, you know, I'm not a licensed counselor like I always say, but I have experience with various disorders, so I can give you some advice at least. So, and also you may end up in one of my videos, I mean your name at least, or your username, depending on if you use your name as your username. So feel free to ask. And it also gives me a good idea of what my audience is looking for as far as questions. So this video is about my personal experiences with borderline personality disorder. So I had an idea, but I wasn't diagnosed until about 2 years ago. At the same time, I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So I think it's better that because so much of my early life especially revolved around autism traits, I think in order to talk about borderline personality disorder, I have to focus on my relationships specifically. So some tidbits from my early life, because it's good to talk about the origins of an issue before just talking about the traits of it. So it's pretty well known that a big cause of borderline personality disorder, besides genetics, because there is a genetic component to it, especially with borderline personality disorder, as compared to narcissistic personality disorder. A big cause is growing up in a chaotic environment and an invalidating environment. So some of my earliest memories involve my parents arguing. I'm not saying that they argued all the time, but that's what I remember, and it's more important. How something affects you with mental illness is more important than reality. So if that's what I remember, that's what's important. And I remember laughing whenever my parents were arguing because it was just regular. That's what I was used to. So it didn't really scare me or bother me too much at that point. I remember I would, whenever I was alone by myself, I would hear the sound of my dad yelling at me in my head, and it used to really scare me. So I would try not thinking about it too much. The thing is with my dad, I'm not going to sit here and say that he, used to beat the crap out of me. He only really hit me a couple times, and it was usually just on impulse. It was just a reaction, which I can normally kind of forgive that with parents, but he was always aggressive about everything. I remember one time I drove by him really fast on my bike, and whenever I went back around the neighborhood and came back, he was like, "What, am I just a little bug that you can't see?" Like, he would yell at me like I was a 30-year-old man. I'm 30 now, so he would yell at me like I would yell at somebody that's my age. And that just wasn't really necessary because I was a really little kid. Sorry, I was a really sensitive child, and you didn't really have to yell at me. All you had to say is I did something wrong and I would feel bad about it. Like a good example, I remember when I was 3 years old, for Christmas, I got like a little thing, a little package of Army Men and I remember I cried. It wasn't because I was sad that that's all I got. I felt bad because I told my parents I wanted an Army Man, but I meant like a G.I. Joe doll, not like little Army Men. And I felt bad that I was making them feel bad, and that's been a theme throughout my life. I don't think about my emotions as much as I do about other people's emotions, and I get angry that they're focusing more on their emotions without mine being validated. And whenever me and my sister were alone, I've talked about this in the past, she used to beat the crap out of me when I was really young. I think what it was, I know now that she likely had conduct disorder, along with potentially PTSD, because I know one time I remember distinctly that she said she was sick and that mom said she could stay home, but my dad just like flipped over her bed. I don't know if he actually hit her, but he would do things around hitting that were just as scary as hitting. Like one time she was on the phone, and my mom asked her to hang up the clothes on the hanger or the clothesline outside so they could dry. And she was like, "1 second, I'm just gonna finish up my phone call." So my dad is like, "What'd you say to your mother?" and just pulled out the phone line. Like, that was so unnecessary. So I think she had PTSD as well, or maybe that led into the conduct disorder. But what I'm trying to get at is she had some sociopathic traits. So I think she might have been, her self-centeredness made her dislike the fact that I was getting attention getting attention away from her. And throughout her life, she would do whatever she could to have the most attention on her, by, getting in trouble at school and just, causing all this trouble. That was her way of abusing me indirectly, besides the physical abuse that she committed against me. And she would just tell me how much my parents hated me. They would say I was a jerk whenever I wasn't around, which wasn't actually false. They would say things like that, but maybe not to the extent that they were saying it. I mean, I can't really remember that much from that time period. So I remember, because the thing is, my dad's argument is always that he was always around. He never left the family, but it's not like he was always involved with the family. He was like, in his study, which pretty much became our living room after a while, watching the Sci-Fi Channel. I remember one time asking permission to eat. He had no idea if I'd eaten or not. In his, standard accusational way, when was the last time you ate? Like I was trying to get extra food. And it had been like 6 hours, and I was a skinny kid at the time. So there's that. And I remember one time whenever I got punished as a kid, like I wasn't a perfect kid. But I was a really good kid, I'd say. Even though he won't admit it. But he would just punish me because he was in a bad mood most of the time. Like I remember one time he had a hamburger, and I remember it smelled really good. I didn't like meat, or at least not like straight up meat at that point. So I asked him if I could have one of those. He's like, "Oh, you want mine? Well, if you don't finish it, you don't get to eat for the rest of the day." And so I couldn't finish it because the taste was too strong because of my Asperger's. But so my mom comes back with Taco Bell, and I can't eat it because of this, random rule that my dad made up on the spot. And that's how life was as a kid. Like I would spend most of my time alone, and then if my sister was babysitting me, she would beat the crap out of me. And my mom was always sleeping. My mom had to sleep like 12 hours a day, or else she was miserable. Lots of times she wouldn't let me go outside because she wouldn't know what would happen to me. But I couldn't watch TV because it would make noise. It's like, what am I gonna do? So, and I'm not gonna say that I didn't have any good memories as a kid. Something that my parents have always used as a crutch is that we always had Christmas, always had holidays and everything. And I do have legitimately really good memories of Christmas. That's why I love Christmas as an adult. One of my best memories is, I remember I was eating like a bread roll with a fork, and everyone was laughing about it. And I just remember all this attention on me, and everything was just so good. All the family was together, everybody was happy. But that didn't last, because I know my parents filed for divorce in 1994. And, after your parents file for divorce, you know it's not a happy family. And I remember telling my mom, because I had just started playing drums, I'm like, I was crying, and she's like, why are you crying? Our divorce has nothing to do with you. I'm like, well, my dad won't be able to show me beats anymore, because he was showing me beats on the drums. And my sister was crying too, and she couldn't understand. My mom couldn't understand, because she doesn't understand anything. Like, why are you upset? Because you hate Pete. It's my dad's name. I wasn't going to use any names, but whatever. He doesn't really care about that stuff anyway. But, she was crying because she was going to lose that stability, which is why she had a nervous breakdown whenever we left Newport Richey, which is my hometown. But, and that's another point I need to bring up. Even good or even bad families have a good time. So just because there's good times doesn't mean you grew up in a good family. So that's a good point to make, because that's a way that abusers will often manipulate people. So my life really changed when we left Newport Richey when I was 9.5. I was still at the age where I used half. And the thing is, because of my autism, before that I didn't really have social skills, but all the kids in the neighborhood, we all grew up together, so we were all pretty much friends, even though I got picked on more than the other kids. We would still hang out on birthdays and everything, so it was still good. But whenever I went to we moved to St. Petersburg, Florida. And I didn't have the social skills, so I couldn't make friends there. Like, I would have assigned friends, because I was the new kid. But I remember one time trying to talk to one of the kids that was assigned after like a couple months. And he's like, look, I don't like you. I was only helping you because you were new, so don't talk to me. So, that's not really a nice thing to say to a person. I remember one time standing outside of our house because I felt my mom had been like lambasting me for the entire car ride, telling me about how good my life is, how lucky I am, how spoiled I am, how lazy I am, and just, saying really mean things to me that didn't make me feel good about myself. And I actually stood outside, like outside our gate, because I didn't feel like I was worthy of standing inside. And I remember thinking, I wish my parents had made things harder on me so that I wouldn't be so spoiled. Like, why'd you make things so easy if you were gonna make me feel bad about it? So, and then thing is, I wasn't really being bullied as bad as I thought in 5th grade. I was just really sensitive to any type of, bullying that I was receiving because I was out of my zone. With autism, it takes a long time to adjust to new environments. So it got to the point where they actually had a meeting with some of the kids in my class, which is funny because the ones they chose were kids that were actually pretty nice for the most part. And they're like, how can we make things better for Justin? And I hated it. I don't like having that much attention on me, especially, a bunch of people thinking how they can make my life better. That's not me. So I just didn't like it. So I started like watching wrestling. I had like this big obsession with wrestling because that's how I can mimic normal behavior with autism. I'll get obsessed with a subject till I know everything about it. So that was me. I would read all the magazines and everything. I knew everything about wrestling. So that was my way of making friends. I was using my weakness as a strength, I guess. But I remember one time this kid was like, why are we still hanging out with Justin? We don't really like him. The other kid was a sweetheart. He was like, well, Justin's cool, Kids are kind of mean. So when I went to 6th grade, we moved again to Largo, Florida. And we moved to an area that was actually pretty dangerous. I've actually looked at reviews of the school. And bullying is actually still rampant. So it was not a good environment for me because I was a little naive little kid that, didn't hate anybody. Not a mean bone in my body. I tried to bully people when I was younger and I couldn't do it because I didn't like hurting people's feelings. This one kid named Charlie, I guess I can say his name because, there's a lot of Charlies in the world. We became friends because he kind of took me under his wing because I was getting bullied really bad. Or at least I didn't think it was that bad in 6th grade. Just, it was constant, but I was kind of used to it at that point. So, and it was the same thing he was into wrestling too, nowhere near as deep into my obsession as I was, but, it was enough so we could get along in that sense. And things weren't too bad in 6th grade. It was really, when I got into 7th grade that things got really bad because I was put into a special program because I had really high test scores, or at least higher than average test scores, and really low in-class performance. So they put me into a program. I mentioned this before. It was Model School Achievement Program. It was a dropout prevention program. They were trying to get me to do better. And it makes sense that would be in that area because it was an impoverished area for the most part. I lived in a trailer park at the time. So people started to, look at me like I was, a special ed kid, like I was mentally handicapped, even though I had high test scores. So at that time, Charlie wasn't so nice anymore. He started doing drugs, and I was afraid of drugs. Those commercials, they worked. So, because I started to really get into, my next obsession was rap music. Well, that was kind of my start into getting into music in the first place. But I started to dress just like Charlie. He used to wear the button-up like flannel, not flannel, like the Tommy Hilfiger shirts. I'm sure y'all can figure out what I'm talking about, and the khakis. So I started to dress just like that. I got obsessed with hip-hop. I still love hip-hop to this day, but I just knew that I didn't know I was starting to lose a grasp on what I really liked. I was starting to model myself as what people wanted me to be. And I started to live in my own fantasy world where, because I was still sort of into wrestling too, so I'd have all these posters on my wall, In my fantasy world, I was a wrestler. I was going to be a wrestler in the future. I was going to be this big rapper in the future, so it didn't matter what people thought about me at that time. Because, I was my parents, they didn't argue all the time. They spent most of their time catatonic, especially my dad. But when they did argue, it was explosive, and I would go hide in my closet. So I lived in my own world where, nothing could hurt me. But me and Charlie had a big falling out whenever we were arguing about who had the more expensive clothes and everything, because that's, in impoverished areas, that's where the most materialistic people you will meet are, because that's what they strive to be. So, and I called him a scrub, and I guess he just, that really cut him to the core. He didn't like being called a scrub. I didn't really mean it. I was just, I didn't even think it was that bad of an insult. It really hurt him, and he just walked out of my house, and after that, I thought we were still friends, but one day he just threw a little pastry cake into my face. It was a hard one though, so it really hurt. Then I threw it back at him, but he had more agility than I had, and he just leapt up in the air. And that was the thing that really sucked, because I was always a bigger kid, so I could have beat up these kids if if they would stay still long enough, but they would like hit me then run. I hate those type of people. If you're gonna hit somebody, don't be a punk about it. And I got to the point where I was just afraid to walk on the bus. Like, they say that words can't hurt you, but they can. I would stay up until 4 in the morning avoiding getting on the bus because they would call me things like hippo hips, and I can't say a lot of the things, but here's fat boy. That's when my anxiety got really bad. That's when it started getting really bad. Then one day, there was like this crevice in the grounds on my way from the bus to my trailer, my mobile home that we lived in, a big old double wide. And I didn't see it because I was kind of lost in my own thoughts like I always was. And I tripped and fell over. And this girl, she came up. This was one of the cool kids, the leaders of the trailer park. And she spit in my face. Like, she said, "Let me spit on you," and just spit in my face. Like, that was just an insult to injury because I was already in such a vulnerable place because I had a falling out with like the leader of all these kids. So nobody really had my back. I remember one time I went up to there was a little like park area in the trailer park, and the one girl, she had her brother like try to throw my bike into the river or the lake, I should say. And I actually kicked her a little bit because, it was just a reaction because she was behind me and everything. But I went home and told my dad because they had also stolen my room key. They thought it was the key to my house. It wasn't. It was just so I could lock my door so my sister wouldn't steal my clothes. So my dad goes up and, yells at all the kids. Those kids weren't scared of adults. They didn't care. They knew that adults would be in way more trouble if they did anything to them. So that just made things worse. And because, I was a bigger kid, I've always been a bigger dude, but, back then I was just, considered a fat kid, so I developed an eating disorder. I started getting to by the summer before 8th grade, I actually got to the point where one day I only ate like a grilled cheese sandwich, and the next day I rode my bike for 4 miles like I would always do, and I actually passed out from low blood sugar. But the messed up part is I was developing body dysmorphia. So even when I looked in the mirror, I still saw a fat kid, even though I was getting really skinny. I was actually underweight at that point. And then whenever I went on the bus at the beginning of 8th grade, this one kid called me big boy. And I was skinny, so it's like I just couldn't win. Then around that same time, I remember whenever I was into wrestling, there was this one scene where I saw this dad with his son, and they both had on the WCW, I think it was Thunder, that was like the Thursday show. And, they were both there at the show, and my dad never liked anything I liked. So I started listening to classic rock. I'm into classic rock to this day because it's good music, but I really did that so me and my dad could start talking about things because he never wanted to talk about anything I was into. And then whenever I was into classic rock and I my same thing I would always do, get obsessed with things. Then I would start like always talking to him about rock music, and then he didn't want to talk about classic rock anymore. Even though that's all he ever wanted to talk about before. Now even that's not okay because I didn't realize as a kid, my dad just liked being miserable. He didn't want to have a relationship with me. He treated me like I was a stepchild, even though I'm his son. And so at that point in 8th grade, we moved to a new school in Bushnell, Florida. I'm still friends with a lot of kids I went to school with in Bushnell, Florida. But I was labeled as a freak because I always wore dark clothing, which was funny, like I was a goth kid, but my shirts were like of the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. I just like dark clothing because I don't like light clothing. I think it looks silly on me. And it's also, I guess, part of my autism. I don't like bright colors. So then about 3 weeks before high school started, my mom went to prison for one of the millions of times she went to prison. I'll make another video about this soon, about that whole situation, but I'll just say that I never had an emotional attachment to her again after that situation. I remember I woke up the morning after she went to prison, and I felt, not the morning, actually the same day, and I felt euphoric. It was like I just purged myself of that attachment that was just so toxic to me. But then I started, the thing is, with that, I was so sad whenever she went to prison that I was at a point where I could never be that sad again. Like, there was no way to be that sad, but I was. So there were these 2 girls at my school, and I remember they were both nice to me in 8th grade, and it was just such little things. One tried to start a conversation with me, bring her into her little circle. She was actually one of the popular girls. And this other one, it was the littlest thing. For our 8th grade graduation, she was sitting in front of me, and she kind of thought some of the things I was saying was funny, and at one point she looked back at me, gave me like a little polite smile, and I didn't understand it. I'm like, are we supposed to be friends now? What's going on here? So during the break between 8th grade and 9th grade, I decided that we were gonna all be friends. So when the school year started, I started like practicing these conversations that we would have together. And I didn't understand how to make friends because, you know, all I knew at that point that was that nobody liked me. So I would sort of like, thing is, I got labeled as a stalker, but I never really followed them around. When I saw them, I would talk to them, and I knew where their lockers were. And I would talk to them almost every day, and I would just have these pre-planned conversations. I didn't realize at the time that I was being creepy, because creepy isn't really a thing to me. I don't know. People don't creep me out. Like, it just doesn't happen with me. So after a couple weeks, when I thought like me and the two of them were like good friends, like my friend came up and said, "Hey, these girls, like, you're creeping them out." I'm like, and I had no idea, and I was just shattered because I thought I had finally made connections with these. I remember I would see one of them, she would walk up to her friends and give them a hug and everything, and I just really wanted to experience that because I'd never really had that, even within my family. So, and coincidentally, I had a scheduling conflict because I was in jazz band, but I suck at sight reading music. I always have, so I couldn't really handle it. So I accidentally switched into two classes that they were both in because they did a lot of their classes together. So it looked like I was switching into their classes just to be near them, when all I was trying to do was be friends with them and hope that I'll be part of their group and everything, because I just really wanted that. So whenever I switched into their two classes, I was gonna talk to both of them because I found out that they thought I was being creepy and I wanted to clear things up. So I was sitting outside of the class in the area that they would usually sit in, and the one girl's boyfriend comes up to me like, "I want you to stop talking to my girlfriend." And I got kind of defensive, like, "You can't tell me what to do." Oh, and I forgot to mention, I'd actually said jokingly that I was like stalking both of them, like, because you know, in like romantic comedies, that's kind of, like, stalking behavior is kind of cute. So I thought, because that was my whole understanding of, you know, relationships was movies and TV shows. So this girl said, you know, "Don't stop stalking my friend. She doesn't like you, and she has a boyfriend." And I got defensive, like, "You can't tell me what to do." It was the same with the boyfriend, like, "You can't tell me what to do," you know. So then they come out and talk to me. And what really bothered me is, why didn't they talk to me first? I was not a threatening kid at the time, and I had only talked to them at school. Like, they had no reason to think I would do anything to them. So if they had just talked to me and explained everything to me, I could have modified my behavior. But, you know, the next thing I know is it feels like everybody in the school is looking at me and thinks I'm a freak. And at the time I wanted to be a rock star, and I thought I could never be a rock star because, you know, I had this in my past, and rock stars are perfect, you know, they're ideal people. So, you know, I was really hyper vigilant for a while. So then I forget how long it was after. I know this all happened within 3 weeks of starting school, but I was in an agricultural class because it was a big farm area. I was in Central Florida. So whenever we went out to like where the cows were, I wasn't supposed to bring my backpack with me. You're supposed to leave it in the classroom, but I did on accident. So it was with me. And a group of kids, or yeah, they were kids at the time, even though they were a lot bigger than me. They asked me like, "What'd you bring your backpack out here for?" So jokingly, I'm like, "Oh, I have a bunch of explosives and stuff and all that." It was pretty obvious. I said it with a big goofy smile, you know. So the next thing I know, I'm in my 5th period class, and I'm getting, you know, taken to the office because the kids have reported me. And I really understand now that I was a weird kid, and they just really didn't want me around. So they were trying to get rid of me, you know, because they were a bunch of, you know, rednecks. They called themselves that, so I can say that too. And I was the weird kid that wore dark clothing, you know, because that's such a evil thing to do. So I almost got expelled for a joke I made. And I remember the principal and the resource officer, a big punk, the principal was more on my side, but that resource officer really wanted to get rid of me. And all I was trying to do was make friends. So they I wasn't allowed to come back to the school for I think it was only like a week, but like I had to do this whole psychological evaluation. And you know, the brilliant psychologist managed to determine that I was depressed and anxious, you know, despite having Asperger's syndrome. And I remember, because I felt so nervous in the agricultural class after that whole situation, one of my friends actually transferred into the class. And I remember we were walking out to the field area, and I tried standing next to him because I knew him and I felt safe next to him. But he kept moving away from me, and I didn't understand that he was doing that on purpose. Then I realized everybody was laughing at me. That didn't make me feel really good about myself. So when I was in 10th grade, there was this girl, and she was a little blonde girl, a little sweetheart. But she was really friendly, really talkative, and as always, I wasn't used to people being that friendly with me. And I was too shy to try to date her or anything. So she eventually got a boyfriend that was really abusive towards her. And I remember by the time I was in 11th grade, I had built it up in my head that me and her were supposed to be together, and that this guy had screwed it up by coming along. So I had developed this whole idea in my head that they were like he had people around the school watching me to make sure that I wouldn't talk to her because she really wanted to be with me. I remember at one point I was actually going to go to where he worked at and beat him up, even though he would have won the fight. He knew how to fight, and I was just a little punk kid. But for some reason, in my senior year, like all the planets aligned, and a lot of girls liked me. It was really interesting. Like when I got on I started my MySpace account, because that's kind of how I learned how to socialize. Because there's no face-to-face interaction, so it's a lot easier. I remember like during Thanksgiving break, I kept getting friend requests from these girls saying I was cute. So in the second half of senior year, I finally got a girlfriend, and she pursued me. And I told her I didn't think I'd be a good boyfriend because I didn't know. I barely knew how to make a friend, let alone a girlfriend. So she pursued me with the idea of who I was in her own head. And we were together for 6 months. And after that, the summer before I went off to college for my one semester that I could handle the first time, she broke up with me, and she had this laundry list of everything I was doing wrong. And it turns out her whole family hated me. They all thought I was immature and just like rude and everything. Which most of that was just me being shy. I didn't know how to talk to people. I wouldn't look people in the eye. And so she went from being the person that had my back that I could tell everything to this like my enemy. She hacked my MySpace account and it got deleted. And that's when my like explosive anger started. Because after she said she wasn't sure if she loved me the first time, I hung up the phone and I went on MySpace and told her how much I hated her. And then I went to talk to my dad about it. He said she probably found a new boyfriend, so I punched a hole through my wall, like I said one time in another video. And the thing is, after she told me everything I did wrong, I was willing to change everything about myself to be with her, because I didn't want a girlfriend to begin with, but now that I had one, I wanted that to be the only girlfriend I ever had. So, because I didn't really have a sense of self to begin with. All those years, I was just trying to become somebody that people would like. And I thought I had finally arrived, but apparently I still wasn't good enough. So then I went to college, but I was super depressed about the breakup. And plus, I had no idea why I was at college to begin with. I applied to University of South Florida, the only college I applied to. They accepted me. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to college now. I had no dreams of going there or anything. So after dropping out, I came back. I felt really bad about myself, because there's nothing worse than an 18-year-old kid that doesn't have his entire future planned out. So I got with another girlfriend, because that's when the numbness started. Like, relationships became my focus. Like, I had to be in relationships, so I had a sense of self, because who I was whatever people thought I was at that point. I'd completely given up on being the kid that liked to sit around playing video games and watching movies when I was a kid. So I got with a girlfriend I didn't even really like that much. And the thing is, at that time, she had a really auspicious future ahead of her, and I was going to kind of latch onto her, I suppose. Because the thing is, I didn't even really know how to love at that point anyway. Like, my first girlfriend, I don't think I really felt a strong attachment until I was developing a strong attachment. But once she broke up with me, that's when I really felt it. So the next girlfriend, she based everything, I swear to God, she based everything on inspirational quotes that she shared on Facebook. Like, I remember one time I thought everything was going good. Then I saw a conversation she was having with her friend on MySpace, like about how much of a jerk I was based upon these quotes, and how I wasn't matching up to these quotes that she decided were the foundations of a relationship. I mean, the thing is, I was really having trouble controlling my emotions at the time, so I would just blow up at her sometimes. So she wasn't wrong for saying I was abusive, because I determined that, or I mean, I haven't determined, but I have a hunch that most abusers aren't aware that they're being abusive. Because I noticed in retrospect that the cycle was starting. I started to not want her to be around her friends and everything, at least internally, because I was so insecure that I didn't know why people liked me in the first place, so I didn't know how to maintain that, so I thought people would just leave eventually. So after everything, after we broke up like the 5th time, I decided I was going to join the Navy to prove to her that I could change. I hoped the Navy would fix me so I'd be a normal person, so I could stop being the lazy, selfish, spoiled person I saw myself as. And I had a horrible time in boot camp. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do the physical parts. I couldn't swim. I couldn't, fold my clothes. So it was a miserable time, and it really only made me feel worse about myself. But the thing is, my big victory though was I was put into this special part for the, it was like the fat kid crew, the kids that couldn't pass their final run because I was good with the strength part, but the running I suck at. I still suck at running. But I made it. Most people that go down there, they don't make it out, but I managed to make it out, so it made me feel pretty good about myself. The ex-girlfriend that I was trying to prove I could change to, I remember I saw on MySpace, because that was my life back then, that she had found a new boyfriend. And I realized at that point, because, I forgot to mention, my mom went to prison again when I was in boot camp, so I had nobody coming to see me when I graduated, and I felt bad, not because of myself, because I thought my dad would feel bad because his parents didn't go to his boot camp graduation, but it turns out afterwards he didn't even want to go in the first place because he didn't want to fly on a plane, which is funny because he loves sitting. You think he loves sitting in a chair to be on a plane. So I really realized at that point that I had nobody. Like, it was all me. So my mom was in prison until about a year after, a few months after on my first ship. So about a year later, I finally was able to go back home. And I remember everything was going so good. I had a new girlfriend at the time, and everyone was getting along really well, I thought. But my mom almost managed to maintain the illusion that she was a good person until the very end. Whenever my sister, I brought this up before, she got mad because my girlfriend at the time was eating her pizza rolls, or was about to eat her pizza rolls, which is a grave sin. And despite the fact that I had given my family $2,000 plus I was giving my dad a monthly allowance while my mom was in prison. And if she needed money, I would give her money. Obviously, I had no problem doing that. So then my mom comes out and just talks about how everybody in the house is sick of my girlfriend being there. Because at that point I pretty much considered the house mine, because I was the only reason they were still living there at that point, unless they were lying to me and they just blew the money on clothes like my mom loves to do. So it was funny because my mom should have had the feeling that she was trying to prove to me that she was sorry for going to prison while I was in boot camp, but instead she was mad that she didn't get to spend all of her time while I was on leave, my vacation, with her. Which, what did she think would happen if I got married? I was gonna, ditch my wife at home and just hang out with her all the time? No. And that was the first time that somebody really saw my family in action. So it was really validating to hear my girlfriend at the time, say, I'm sorry that you go through this. Because my parents, they're not really tactful, but they can kind of, for a certain amount of time, they seem like they're really cool people. So it becomes confusing to people whenever I complain about them. So on my first ship, for like the first year, I had a lot of trouble. And the big thing is I would have issues with any type of criticism. If you said my shirt was kind of dirty, I would hear that as your shirt is dirty and you are a bad person and everybody on the ship hates you and all they can think about is how bad you are. Like, that's how it was for me. That's how criticism, it just went right down to my soul. And my thought process would be, what about all these good things I'm doing? Now all this person thinks is that I'm a person that doesn't like to clean their shirts. That defines me. And I didn't feel good about that. And in addition to that, compliments would stay with me all day too. Like, if somebody said I was a great person, then I was like, oh my God, I'm a great person now. Like, I felt so good about myself. And then if somebody said, oh, you messed up this maintenance check or whatever, then I'd be like, oh, I'm a bad person again. Well, this sucks. I was a good person. Like, because I didn't think that people could have good and bad qualities at the same time, which is black and white thinking. Well, the big thing with me is I was afraid that if somebody had a bad quality, or what I perceived as a bad quality, that maybe they had all these other bad qualities, and I couldn't handle that, because whenever I found out my mom had like a drug problem and everything, it really disillusioned me, and I couldn't stand the thought of somebody I thought that was so amazing and perfect, like an angel, would have all these other bad qualities that naturally coincide with this one bad quality. And it could be as little as liking a weird movie that I didn't like. It was like just all these little things. And when I was, the thing is, it's kind of a two-sided thing, because a lot of people liked me when I was in the Navy, but a lot of like my leadership didn't like me because I get along with people, but I don't have any, I've never had any desire to be any type of leader. I just like doing work and having it be done. So what I always had to do is something I'm good at is studying. I'm good at rote memorization and everything. So I studied for my advancement exam, and I remember, and when I made it off a 6% advancement, because I got a really high score, there was this one kid that was on the ship with me, and he took it so personally, like me making advancement had anything to do with him. And people would just complain about how I studied all the time because the funny thing is they would sit around watching movies all the time. They could have been studying too. And it was like, wow, I just could not win no matter what I do. And it got to the point where I would like exhaust myself, like making it very clear how much work I was doing, and it just would not work. Then in the middle of 2011, in May 2011, my sister committed suicide. I made a video about that. I don't need to talk all about it again. But after that, her dad started saying all these bad things about my mom and everything, which it turns out a lot of them were actually true, or at least I'm pretty sure they're true now. So I was defending my family, and I'm saying, don't talk about my family. You know, a lot of people know how that goes. It's like what you're saying may be true, but it's not your place to say these things. And I shut everybody down, and I told them, if you want to talk about my family, you go through me. So they were all like, and my sister's dad was talking about how mentally unstable I am, which was actually true. It was actually correct, but it just all these negative things. I had all this negative energy coming at me when I was dealing with the trauma of my sister's suicide. So I met a girl, a really pretty Japanese girl, who had a really similar childhood to me, except she had some other things that I'm not going to divulge. And I felt like we really connected because she liked the sensitive side of me. She liked the guy that wrote poetry for her and everything. And what was really important to me is that everybody would see that I had this, you know, in my mind, this perfect angel that was my girlfriend, and everybody would think, oh, I'm great now. This guy's great. This screw up, this you know, horrible person is actually a good person now. And all the while, she was treating me like crap. I was spending all this money on her. She kicked me out of her apartment like 3 times while I was staying with her. She wouldn't let me sleep in, even though I was on vacation while I was with her. And what was weird though is because I didn't really realize at the time, but what was really different about the situation is her family, because they would eat dinner around the table, and my family stopped doing that years ago. And they were just really curious about me. They would ask me all these questions. Her mom would like buy me little cakes or, you know, little snacks that she knew I liked. She knew that I liked milk tea, so the fridge was filled with milk tea, and she just noticed all these things. And her dogs loved me. And whenever I went to Guam, her dogs apparently would, you know, they would still look for me to come back home. And I picked orders back to Japan. I argued with my detailer so I could be with her. And then the big culmination is she attempted suicide on the phone with me, and I screamed at her to go to call it's 119 in Japan and get her stomach pumped. And I felt guilty for having to leave because of my job, because I felt like I could have done more to stay with her. But I picked orders back to Japan, and I forgot to mention, like, her mom cried whenever I left. Like, wow. And then while I was in San Diego for a technical school before I came back to Japan, she told me she had a new boyfriend, and he had been there for her when I wasn't. And I will never forget that. Like, I remember after she attempted suicide, walking to work, because I was duty IT, like I just had to check like emails, and I told one of my friends that was standing watch, I don't know if my girlfriend's alive. I was still calling her my girlfriend even though she had already dumped me, and I built this story in my head that she really loved me, she wanted to be with me, but her new boyfriend had convinced her and had taken advantage of her because she was vulnerable, because she missed me so much. Because I couldn't handle the thought that she didn't love me, like somebody else didn't love me. So I would imagine just beating him up, and I started working out obsessively to relieve my anger. And I had to do it constantly, or else I would start getting all these scary thoughts. And I started punching myself in the stomach to relax myself. I call myself a wimp and everything. And I remember I would go out around Yokosuka, and I was afraid because I had discovered that this girl had negative qualities, that maybe she had all these other negative qualities, and that I felt like everybody was laughing at me because she had told everybody how much of a loser I was, and she had been hooking up with all these other guys. And I was afraid I was going to hurt somebody because I was having so much trouble controlling my anger at that point. Like, anything would make me angry, and I would just have a major anger attack. And I started hooking up, like, every weekend. I'd go to Roppongi, the party area in Tokyo, and meet women, and I didn't care what they looked like or anything. I just had to validate myself. It was ego defense. I had to know that I was desirable to somebody. And finally, I got another girlfriend who had a serious drinking problem. I made a video about her too. And I almost got in a fight with the Master Chief over her. And just wasn't a good time. I was in a really bad place, and I was getting treated really bad at work, which I also made a video about. And I started turning into a different person I didn't know whenever I was drinking because I would black out really easy, because whenever you're stressed out or you're really anxious, your nervous system gets exhausted, so you actually black out from drinking faster. And I would do and say these things that I just couldn't imagine, and I was afraid I was going to get in trouble, or like I said, hurt somebody, and I was losing control of myself. I was holding my sanity together all on my own. So I already talked about my ship that was on the Shiloh, but after I left, like right after I left, I started making music, because I bought an iPad and it had, I could download all these little programs, and I started to feel really good about myself, because I knew that I had something that would impress people, or at least attract people to me without me having to project myself out. And in 2014, my mom stole my identity and opened 2 credit cards in my name. It promised to pay me back within 6 months, but didn't start paying me back till about a year later, and her excuses were always like, we have a light bill, or we have a phone bill. And I finally accepted the fact that I had bad parents. So I looked up, the funny thing, my big revelation for me was, I looked up traits of abused children, and I found a Cracked article, and every single trait was me. And it was like, oh my God, all this time, that's all it was. And I came to the realization that all the people that hurt me, it was simple. They were selfish, and I was empathetic, and I was easy to use. And, I was food for a narcissist, because I was this really insecure guy. You could tell me anything. I would put all the blame on myself if anything went wrong. And I realized I couldn't be like that anymore. So after I started school at Temple University, I also talked about this in another video. It was really overwhelming, because getting out of the Navy and starting, moving to a new town, all of that stuff is really, people had panic attacks from that. That causes panic attacks. That's standard. But my credit score dropped 200 points because my mom decided to stop paying a bill on something a card that she had opened under my name. And I felt like I had no control. So one day I just snapped, and I just couldn't handle anything anymore. And after fighting against it for 2 months, I finally started going to therapy, because I needed some type of medication to stop my panic attacks that I was having during my Japanese classes and on the train. Because I couldn't just keep drinking all the time. That would have, eventually killed me pretty fast. So I started in therapy, and it really helped, finally. And I remember I got to the point, because it was always just, you have depression, you have anxiety. My therapist, she couldn't figure out what was wrong with me for the longest time, because I seemed so stable, so well put together. But I had all these horrible things in my past. And then I finally admitted to her, after having my last anger attack, I have no idea how I feel about anything. Like, whenever I say I'm feeling good today, I don't know that. If I say I like this movie, I don't know if I like it. I'm just running this script that that I use to make it through every day. So, I became a master at hiding my issues. So much that I was able to convince myself that there was nothing wrong. And that's what was important, admitting that I didn't feel good and I didn't know why. So how do I feel these days? I still do have the nagging feeling that if I do a little thing wrong, that people are going to hate me. I always check Facebook to see if my friends have deleted me after I say a joke they don't like, or little things like that. Before I started on Zoloft, I talked about this too. I had like a day-long anxiety attack because my girlfriend had left her phone at home, and I was afraid that, because my mind, it just instantly related that to all the bad experiences I had before. But she's been really patient with me whenever I had my anxiety, so it's really helped a lot. And a big thing that really helps me is whenever I see how I'm helping other people on my YouTube channel. So I hope people keep watching, and I hope I can keep helping people. So I know this video has been extremely long. I'm not sure if I'm going to break it up into separate parts, but I hope this video doesn't come off as just me, with my self-pity. I mean, there's nothing wrong with feeling bad for yourself sometimes. That can be really helpful. So like I said, if you have other questions, I'll try to answer them the best I can. Maybe I'll expose you to my massive audience. So I think that's pretty much it. So if you like my music, subscribe. If you like my video, subscribe. If you like my music, buy it. And if you hate me, tell everybody. Out.